Speaking on camera is not easy. Just know that if you're feeling this way, it's completely normal, and thankfully there are ways that we can lessen those nerves. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this Power to Fly chat and learn about how to stand out in your virtual presentations. My name is Lorraine Lee and I'm the managing editor at Prezi. So today I'm going to share how you can also stand out in your own virtual presentations and with your video content on LinkedIn. It's definitely possible for all of us to learn how to get more comfortable in video and to create great videos that can lead to new opportunities. Whether you're interviewing, whether you're doing a webinar, or even if you just want to become a thought leader in your industry. So we'll be talking about how you can get more confident on video. I'll share some best practices for those video meetings. So my first tip is to add visuals. Not only do they help you remember what you want to talk about, they help to deflect some of the attention away from you and it moves them onto the visuals instead. So I'm sure a lot of you have graphs and charts on hand already. The focus is not always on my face, but I'm still the authority by talking about the content and walking my audience through it. Now, the second tip I want to share with all of you is lighting. So try to have your light source always coming from in front of you. And ideally, you actually will have a window in front of you. So you get that natural light coming in from the front. Now, the third tip is to focus on your background. So a clean background like Peter and like Jessica usually works best so that you and your visuals don't get lost. Let's talk about best practices for your video meetings, your webinars, and your virtual conferences. So the first tip is to focus on your framing and your body language. So this is what I often see in video meetings. Great to see your face, but this is a bit close, and it can be hard for the other side to stay engaged when you're talking to a floating head. So your video should ideally show your shoulders and a bit of your torso. This allows others to see more than just a floating head, and it feels more like you're having an in-person conversation with someone. Eye contact is also going to be really important to make your virtual presentation feel more personable, but it can be one of the harder things to do. You should be looking at the camera or right below it here. I find that turning off self-view is a nice way to do this. Now, the last tip is hand gestures are a great way to build trust with your audience. Research has actually shown that movements like open palms and mirroring the other person's body language makes the person on the other side have a more positive impression of you. So you can use basic gestures like counting things off. If you're talking about something small, use the pinch gesture. Obviously, widen your hands if it's something bigger. The next thing to do when you're presenting in video meetings is to make sure you're standing and projecting. And it just feels a lot more dynamic than if you were just sitting in his chair giving that presentation. And the last thing I recommend you do is to project your voice. If you raise your voice 25% louder than you might normally speak, it helps you eliminate filler words that might otherwise creep in and make you seem unsure of yourself. So by raising your voice, you're becoming a lot more intentional about what you want to say.
What should I do to not appear nervous or uncomfortable when speaking virtually?
The first tip I would give is to make sure that you're practicing at least a minimum of 10 times to start really internalizing the content and what you'll be presenting. And the second tip that I would give is to use visualization. I think visualization has proven to work really well. It's a technique that I'm trying to use a little bit more of, to just envision the presentation, imagine your audience loving it. And this is actually something I did today. Choose a picture of someone who makes you smile or who you're very comfortable around. When I get nervous, I take a funny picture of my sister and I just put it right next to my presenter notes, and it feels like I'm talking to her and it helps calm me down. So I would recommend trying that technique as well.
How did you overcome the hesitation of speaking amid people who may interrupt or speak over you?
So the first thing I would say is to plan what you might want to say based on what the agenda is for the meeting. Ideally, you have an agenda. I think the hardest part about speaking up is actually doing it when the moment comes. But if you are to plan ahead of time, you kind of help yourself overcome that hurdle a little bit because you are prepared and you know what you want to say. And the second thing I would say is just to remember your value. Remember you're there for a reason. You have as much value as anyone else in the meeting. So speak up and own your value, and you were invited to that meeting for a reason. Have an advocate who can help guide the conversation. Ideally, you have someone on your team who you really trust. Hopefully they're going to be in that meeting with you, and then they can be that person who kind of jumps in and says, well, let's take a moment to pause and hear from other people in the group. Having that advocate, I think, is going to be really key. If you don't have an advocate, maybe you just send an email ahead of time before the meeting and you just let everyone know that you have some thoughts on this and this topic and you'd like to just make sure they get heard when you actually attend the meeting.
Can you suggest a tip to controlling the speed of your voice?
One thing I would do is to take advantage of presenter notes at the top of each slide or frame, whatever program you're using, and in all caps, put the words slow down. So that's just a good visual reminder. Between each section, just pause for a second and take a deep breath, and that really allows you to reset.
How would you recommend presenting a lot of information with skipping the important details?
So the first thing I'd recommend is to take advantage of async communication. For those of you who don't know, it is when you send information to someone and it's not dependent on time, so they don't need to respond or react right away. So I do this a lot at Prezi. Record a video of yourself talking about the important points ahead of a meeting so that when they're actually in the meeting, they're not absorbing a ton of new information and feeling overwhelmed and trying to put all the pieces together. And I'd also just think about your audience. What is important to them and how can you tie the problem into an issue that they also care about? I'll actually encourage you to not dive into the details. And unfortunately, most people don't really care about the specific details, even if they are important. I think they just want to know the main problem and easy solution to fix it.
What are your favorite ways to practice?
What I like to do is I like to run through it a few times without recording as I go through it. Like sometimes I make changes to the presentation. And then when I start feeling a little bit more comfortable, I like to record myself, and I'll usually do that like once or twice. And then I like to practice in front of other colleagues or maybe my family and my friends. Having someone to present in front of is good. If you don't have anyone who you can do it in a live setting, use that recording, send it to them and see if they have any feedback. You can all do this. Right? I was so nervous before. I'm still a little nervous for this one, but like so nervous before. And now, I've interviewed so many people since then, and I'm doing virtual presentations with really cool companies like Power to Fly. So just know that it's completely possible for you to improve and get better over time. It just takes practice and patience with yourself.